Hi, I'm Rae.
I'm Meredith.
I'm AK.
And this is day 3. Today we went to the Iolani Palace and the state capitol. We took a tour of both, and it was pretty cool.
One thing that I found really interesting about seeing the palace and um, something that I hadn't realized was that Hawaii was considered an equal player in kind of the global economy at the time. And what we saw in the palace was a lot of gifts that were given, portraits from other monarchs in England and all through Europe. And it made me really realize how the way Britain treated Hawaii was a lot different than the way the U.S. did.
And it kind of reminds me of the trip to the Bishop Museum that we took yesterday. And there's an instance where they talk about how the Liliuokalani and her sister and her brother, they go to D.C. for like a gala of some sort, and they're completely disrespected because they're mistaken for African Americans. And at that time, there was still a lot of racism, so it made sense. But then when they go to England for like this other gala with Queen Victoria, they're like completely embraced, and everyone's like perfectly fine with them. And it just goes to show like the difference in race relations at the time, but also just how like the different countries viewed monarchies, because like most of Europe, most of Africa and Asia still had their monarchies, whereas the U.S. was very just proud of not having one, and so they were just very much against it and didn't understand it.
And then we went to go talk to some representatives at the state capitol. And throughout the afternoon, there were a lot more people that showed up than we had originally anticipated, which was nice. There was a senator that came, and it was just interesting to hear every single person's perspective on what it means to be a Hawaiian and like blood quantum and sovereignty and the land, because there, like we were talking about earlier, there are just so many contradictions in that, and I haven't found something other than each person wanting to make the situation better, but other than that, which is like so varied even in itself, there's not one unifying thing between all the different people and all the different parties. So it makes it kind of difficult to work towards, I guess, because what you're working towards looks completely different from each point of view. So I don't really know what.
Yeah. It reminds me of the Occupy Wall Street movement and how the reason it's gaining a lot of momentum in so many different places all over the world. But the reason why it's not making serious change is because everyone wants something different. Like you walk in a protest, and every sign is like for a completely like different facet of what they want.
There's also this idea of like how Hawaiian do you need to be, and like what constitutes a Hawaiian, because it seems to be pretty not vague but open, and anybody can be a Hawaiian or become a Hawaiian, and so it could technically include like very specific or very broad populations. So that's also weird when you're thinking about sovereignty and who's included and who's excluded, and how do you narrate and navigate those issues.
That's something they seem to really go back and forth on and contradict themselves on, is that that they pride themselves on how accepting they are of everyone, because Hawaii is such a melting pot and everyone is mixed between all the immigrant groups that are pretty equal. But then at the same time, you have to have these certain signifiers of being Hawaiian or having this percentage of blood. But then they also talk about how you cannot have any Hawaiian blood in you but still be more Kanaka, they say, and practice the Hawaiian traditions than someone who is 50% or 100% Hawaiian. And it really confuses the actual policy that they put into place and how that's affecting people who don't have that blood quantum. So
there's like also just a lot of prejudice like from like everyone else against the Native Hawaiians that like you can see it within like the race of incarceration, and how like it, just like on the mainland, like it was primarily minorities in jail. Like over there is primarily minorities. And I think the largest group of like Native Hawaiians that we've seen thus far was like that group of from the women's prison that were like mowing the lawn. And so like it's I feel like I mean maybe this is actually incredibly cruel to say, but maybe they kind of just need the lighter person so that the rest of the United States will still like accept that. Kind of like this goes further back into civil rights stuff, where how Rosa Parks wasn't the first one to do the whole bus boycott, but because she was lighter and because she was like a working like middle class woman, they couldn't say anything bad about her if she like was put into public. Whereas the first girl, who was like a much darker pregnant teen, would have just been like a bad face for it. So I can see that reflected here, and I don't know, maybe that's what maybe that's not what necessarily needs to be done, but it's probably just going to be common for a while. Chris Lee, like he was one of the like assistant legislator for people, and he had he was a legislator because he had his own district, but he talked about how he went to school in like Oregon, and it wasn't until he came back after that he started to notice like differences in ethnicities among like his friends, whereas before he just saw it all as just like we're just all here, we're all people, but then coming back it's like you're Korean, you're Chinese, you're Native Hawaiian, you're white. It's just interesting how it really is just like not maybe just a mainland thing, but it's mostly like continental US that has these notions of difference among the ethnicities, whereas in Hawaii it's really just like one thing.
And I can't tell if it's a facade or if this is actually if this is what he actually believes. And I can't tell because it's so foreign. It's a foreign concept coming from the mainland, or if he's just doing this because he also has an agenda and he's a politician, and there's a certain point to be made. So
Right, they talk about how accepting they are, but then you hear all this stuff about, like they talked about the use of the word haole, what is it? Haole. And just discrimination against, I don't know, the Western way of life, and I guess, yeah, Westerners and non-natives and non-locals who come. And so it's like when you hear their personal opinion that when they take off their politician hat, they actually do show how it isn't as accepting. But then when they are being the politician, they seem to say how, we're all a mix of every race and we're all so accepting. So you really do see the two sides of politicians.
And so, well, that was today, and you'll see whatever happens tomorrow. We go to Pearl Harbor and have to go to sleep soon. So.